Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Have History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and this video continues the story of William Blount and the first impeachment. President John Adams brought the letter and the conspiracy to the Senate, who cleared out the gallery and read the letter from Blount to Carey out loud. Blount was not in the chamber. He had stepped out. When the senators heard about the conspiracy, they erupted. When Blount returned to the chamber, the senators read the letter out loud again, to the astonishment of Blount, who turned pale as he realized what the senators had been given. When confronted with the conspiracy, Vice President Thomas Jefferson asked Blount whether the letter was written by him. Blount stated that he had written to Carey on or about that time, but could not confirm that the wording was correct. He asked for a day to assemble his papers and find if the copy of the letter was accurate. The Senate granted him that privilege. When the House of Representatives heard the letter read out loud, they immediately called for an investigation. On July 4th, Blount was supposed to meet with the Senate to answer for the letter. However, he did not show up. He sent a letter to the Senate asking for more time, which angered Jefferson and the senators, and they called for an investigation as well. Blount was on the run. Government officials tracked him down to the waterfront in Philadelphia, but since they did not know him personally, he managed to escape, but the officials did find multiple trunks containing Blount's papers on board, and those were turned over to the Senate. Politicians accused Blount of treason, and First Lady Abigail Adams lamented that Philadelphia had no gallows with which to punish Blount. On July 6th, Blount reappeared in the Senate, going about his duties. He had decided to fight back against the allegations rather than run. Talk in the Senate and the House included impeachment and expulsion. Since this would be the first time an impeachment would occur, both the Senate and the House questioned their powers to do so. The House of Representatives drew up the impeachment articles, and on July 8th, the Senate voted 25-1 to expel Blount from the Senate. After being expelled, the Senate made him pay $1,000 of his own money and $1,000 of his surety's money to ensure that he returned to the Senate to stand trial. He paid the money but then eluded a federal marshal and began his flight to Tennessee. By July 25th, word came that Blount was spotted about 6 miles south of Staunton, Virginia. However, before anyone could catch up to him, he had made it to North Carolina, then proceeded to Tennessee. It took multiple sessions of Congress to complete the impeachment proceedings. In February 1798, the House of Representatives presented the impeachment articles to the Senate, but the impeachment trial did not begin until December of that year. In August 1798, the Senate charged the Sergeant-at-Arms, James Mathers, to deliver a summons to Blount in Knoxville, Tennessee. When he arrived at Blount's house, he found that the former senator was out, so he left the summons with Blount's wife. The next day, the Sergeant-at-Arms found Blount, who took him into his home and fed him, but he refused to be taken prisoner to appear before the Senate. Mathers appealed to local officials to help him take Blount into custody, but none would go along with him, and he had to return to the Senate without Blount. According to some stories, the local citizens walked Mathers out of the city, informing him that he would not be taking Blount with him. By January of 1799, the case against Blount was dismissed, citing a lack of jurisdiction over the former member. Although it seems odd, we have to remember that the country under the Constitution was about 10 years old, and this was the first impeachment proceedings. The men who signed the Constitution questioned how much authority they actually possessed in the situation. Ultimately, they decided that senators could not be impeached, and even if they could impeach a senator, the Senate had expelled Blount within days of reading the conspiracy letter, so they lacked jurisdiction to impeach Blount. This is important because it set up the precedent that senators cannot be impeached, but they can be expelled from the Senate. Ultimately, Blount's legal counsel won out because they didn't really deny what he did. They just argued that the Senate had no stand-in in the situation except for their ability to expel him from the chambers. In Tennessee, Blount didn't lose the confidence of its citizens. That was partly due to major Tennesseans like John Sevier and Andrew Jackson supporting him. Even while under investigation, Blount attempted to harass surveyors attempting to survey treaty land from the Cherokee, attempting to save some of the land that he conspired with England to secure. He also won a seat in the Tennessee State Senate, and one of his first actions in that role was to impeach a judge who interfered with his interference in the treaty at Tellico Plains. When an epidemic would run through Knoxville in 1800, Blount was one of its victims, dying on March 21st and buried at the First Presbyterian Church Cemetery in Knoxville. Blount County, Tennessee, along with the city of Blountville in that state, was named after him. Maryville, Tennessee, in Granger County, Tennessee, was named after his wife, Mary Granger Blount. Streets have been named after him in North Carolina and Wisconsin, and a fort in Jackson County, Tennessee was named Fort Blount in his honor. Even the University of Tennessee's original name was Blount College, named after the defamed senator. Despite his odd story of conspiracy and impeachment, the name Blount still remains prominent in United States cities to this day, and it was his impeachment that set the precedent for all federal impeachments going forward.